Medical experts are warning Australians to remain vigilant and continue abiding by strict social distancing measures this Easter weekend. Tim Lester is in Canberra, and Tim, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, says those restrictions will be in place for some time.
In fact, Katrina, Dr Nick Coatsworth says that there will be many weeks more of sustained falls in the numbers of new coronavirus cases before medical authorities are satisfied that restrictions can be eased. This runs counter a little bit to much of the state talk about, for example, resumptions of football codes and the like, and relaxation of restrictions in other areas. Instead, Dr Coatsworth congratulates Australians on what he says is an historic and unprecedented adoption of social distancing rules, and up until now, and including Easter, a great success from Australians in the way they've taken to the new rules.
But it's certainly too early to be talking about relaxation at the moment. It is something that we're thinking about. It was very fast into the restrictions and they were very widespread. It needs to be very nuanced on the way out.
And Tim, the government is providing further support for charities.
Yes, Katrina, this is a recognition that charities have been under deep pressure and growing pressure as more Australian businesses close and the numbers who rely on charities grows. The government recently announced they'll receive $200 million to deliver urgent relief. Now, today it confirmed that half of that funding, $100 million, will be rolled out from next week, distributing between more than 300 charities and community organisations across the country. They'll ensure food hampers can reach homes through Food Bank Australia and Oz Harvest, among others, as well funding for St Vincent de Paul and the Red Cross to support 30,000 temporary migrants who are not eligible for the government's wage subsidies. All of this are coming as the government looks to bolster support mechanisms as the crisis, the economic crisis caused by coronavirus deepens. Katrina?
All right, thank you, Tim Lester in Canberra. The State Minister forced to resign for breaching COVID lockdown laws has made his first appearance since the scandal broke. It comes as the New South Wales Premier backed police over their $1,000 fine. Alex Hart reports.
Don Harwin refused to answer questions when he returned home here earlier this afternoon. The Upper House Liberal MP went out for his morning walk and a cup of coffee at around about 8 a.m. and returned 6 hours later with a shopping bag. The outgoing Arts Minister still with a smile on his face after being forced to resign from Cabinet last night.
I'm not saying anything beyond what I said yesterday, thanks.
What did you say yesterday? Sorry, can you just reiterate that for us? You're sorry to the people of New South Wales? Did you make an honest mistake, do you think, Mr Hum? How are you doing personally? In his statement, he said he believed he didn't breach coronavirus public health orders. Police fined him for staying at his holiday home on the Central Coast instead of his primary place of residence, but wouldn't elaborate on the fine today.
All I can say is that there was a complaint received by police, an investigation conducted and an infringement issued.
Well, obviously, when police undertook their investigations and made their decision, I have to back the police.
The Premier says she is in no hurry to fill Mr Harwin's position in Cabinet.
In the interim, I'll be taking on his responsibilities.
We are very supportive of the decision that he has made and he had no choice, really.
Despite resigning from the front bench, it's understood Don Harwin has no intention of ending his 21-year parliamentary career.
The death toll has risen once more in New South Wales, with the state's Premier warning the worst is yet to come. But despite the latest casualty of the virus, health authorities are confident social distancing measures are working. Peter Fegan reports.
Well, despite there being a drop in the number of new cases here in New South Wales overnight, the Premier delivered a very dire Easter message today where she quite simply said the worst is yet to come. 44 new cases were recorded in the last 24 hours, taking the state's total to 2,857. Unfortunately, a 91-year-old woman has become the latest fatality. She is now the 23rd person to die from the virus in the state.
It doesn't matter what the time, it's always tough when a family member passes away. and this is the toughest of times.
Now, in some lighter news, there was an Easter gift today for 1,300 people who were given the all clear to head home. These are the passengers that arrived into Sydney on the 29th of March. Now, that was the day the rules changed. Anyone entering New South Wales from an overseas country is now required to quarantine for a period of 14 days. Guarded by military and police, they stayed in a number of hotels around the city, and it was safe to say that most of them were very happy to be heading home today.
It had to be done. There are worse places to be.
No fresh air. Got really dusty during the week. Couldn't breathe properly. The air conditioning was terrible as well. Yeah, it was just a nightmare.
Now, interestingly, the New South Wales government was also quizzed on the National Rugby League today. ARL Commission Chairman Peter V'landys has said that he has a letter from the New South Wales government giving him permission to start both playing and training again in May. Although both the Premier and the Health Minister say the letter is not from either of them, but they also made it very clear that they never told the NRL they can't play.
The government did not stop rugby league playing. Rugby league stopped rugby league playing.
And just finally, the Premier has also credited the people of New South Wales for that infection rate dropping, saying for the most part, people are adhering to both the new rules and the health advice.
To Melbourne now, and a plane carrying up to 80 coronavirus patients is on its way to Australia on a Mercy flight home from South America. Tegan Doling, health authorities are fearing another cruise ship nightmare.
Yeah, that's right, Katrina. The plane is due to land here in Melbourne at 6:30 tomorrow morning. On board more than 100 Australians, and it is feared that at least 80 of them have tested positive to coronavirus. Now, they were all on board the Greg Mortimer cruise ship, which departed on the 15th of March on a voyage to Antarctica, but it has been docked off Monte Video for a couple of weeks. Now, after a number of mercy calls to the government, this repatriation flight was finally organised.
Anybody who needs to go to hospital will go to hospital, and the remaining passengers will go to quarantine in hotels. We are preparing in case that there is any deterioration on the plane. So we've been assured from those who've undertaken those medical assessments that the patients are fit to fly, but of course we're not leaving anything to chance.
As you heard, they all are fit to fly at the moment, but we know how quickly COVID-19 patients can go downhill. Our two major hospitals here in Melbourne are ready for an influx of patients. We've been told there will also be ambulances on the tarmac ready to take the sickest of patients straight to hospital. Those who are feeling okay will be sent on a bus to hotels for the 14-day quarantine, the isolation, because it seems as though Victoria Health has very much learnt from the Ruby Princess debacle. Katrina.
All right, thanks for the update. Tegan Doling in Melbourne. More than 500,000 Americans have now tested positive to COVID-19 as the death toll in the United States nears 20,000. US correspondent Paul Caddick reports.
Yeah, good evening. It seems every day the hopeful news still comes with so much tragic news here in the state of New York, which has now recorded more COVID-19 cases than any other country. The state's governor, though, today said he was cautiously optimistic, with the average rate of new hospitalisations still falling. And for the first time since the crisis began, there were fewer people in intensive care than there was the day before. But also yesterday, another 777 people died here in New York. The state's death toll now around 8,000, the nation's more than 18,000. As Donald Trump is again talking about reopening the economy, reopening the country, with 17 million Americans already filing for unemployment in the last 3 weeks. That's around 10% of the workforce. Donald Trump says it's something he'd like to see as early as next month, the reopening, but medical experts caution against reducing social distancing too soon, wanting to avoid a resurgence in cases and deaths.
We hope we're going to be able to fulfill a certain date, but we're not doing anything until we know that this country is going to be healthy.
We have not reached the peak. And so every day we need to continue to do what we did yesterday and the week before.
As the nation last night honoured those healthcare and essential workers on the front line of the outbreak by lighting up blue more than 100 landmarks across the United States. A silent but very visual thank you to those working tirelessly to try and save lives, even at the risk of their own. From New York, it's back to you.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is back on his feet after being moved out of intensive care 2 days ago. His father appeared on radio saying his son's stay in hospital helped the country realise how serious the situation is.
If it can hit the Prime Minister, for heaven's sake, to use that American expression, he almost took one for the team.
980 people have died in the UK in the past 24 hours, with those figures expected to rise for at least another 2 weeks. Landlords and tenants are at war as confusion reigns over what entitlements they're allowed to receive in the wake of the coronavirus crisis. Tom Chadwick has more.
The coronavirus crisis is creating so much uncertainty at the moment, it seems that no industry is exempt. The real estate sector is in turmoil due to the lack of clarity on what rights renters have as opposed to landlords. If tenants lose their jobs or their salary is impacted as a result of the coronavirus lockdowns, paying rent is a huge issue.
We've asked it to be reduced and that's been turned down.
But as always, there is a knock-on effect. Roger Galway owns 6 investment properties and is concerned he won't be able to pay the mortgages because his tenants are out of work.
It'll be in bankruptcy to me. And if I can't pay the bank, then they're going to repossess my properties because I don't have the funds to pay that.
The government's lack of clarity on the issue is a concern.
There's a lot of misunderstanding between a deferment in rent and a reduction in rent. Deferment means that we'll defer the rent until things get better and the tenant pays it back. Reduction means that they're getting a reduced amount of rent.
With the coronavirus crisis looking like hanging around for the time being, so too will the uncertainty.
Good Friday Mass was like no other for Pope Francis. The pontiff presided over the Way of the Cross procession in St Peter's Square rather than in the traditional Colosseum venue. He reminded worshippers to try to take a positive out of this health crisis and acknowledge the feeling of solidarity.